Thank you very much, Tarmo, for your kind introduction. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's really honor and pleasure for me to chair this first session of this prominent meeting. And the session is described as the message of science. And we will have 3 invited presentations. After the coffee break, we will have altogether 4 presentations of best practice from Estonian universities. And in the later afternoon at 5:20, we will start with a panel discussion. So that's just the order which we are following. But I have to already mention right now that maybe one of the invited speakers, Mrs. Katrin Maas, she is late with her airplane. Or she arrived, I heard. Okay, nice to meet you. Thank you. So we can continue in the order which is written down in the schedule you have already seen. And I would like to start with the first speaker of this session. It is, it is Professor Sierd Cloetingh. He is president of Akadeemia Europea, and he is president of the Association for European Cooperation in Science and Technology, short COST. He is a distinguished professor at Utrecht University. His research field is earth sciences. He is a member of several academies and was distinguished in 2006 as Chevalier de Legion d'Honneur and in 2014 as Knight of the Royal Order of the Netherlands Lion for his contributions to science and European scientific cooperation in research and education. And he will speak about the following topic: leveraging scientific excellence for policy making in Europe, cooperation between Academia Europea, the Young Academy of Europe, and COST. Please go ahead, the chair is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Kreutzer, for this kind introduction. And of course, a big thank you to the President of the Estonian Academy and his staff for organizing today and tomorrow a meeting on a very important topic. More timely maybe than ever. So also in this context, it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you. Science-based policy advice is a topic not to be carried out in splendid isolation. It requires community building. It requires a collective effort. And in this context, Academia Europea is very happy to be with other academies part of the scientific advice mechanism set up by the European Commission. And in this context, we are also very pleased about the synergy that is developing between the Academia Europea, the Young Academy of Europe, and the COST Association. Let me first start off with a few words about Academia Europea itself. As you can see, we also are celebrating a jubilee, 30 years. We are not as senior yet as the Estonian Academy, but also here it is a process where people took an initiative. In our case, a group of scientists on this picture sitting together in Cambridge decided in 1988 that at a time of very major political changes in Europe, that Europe needed a pan-European academy. Nobody told them to do so. This was clearly a bottom-up process. And as was mentioned by the chair, my background is earth sciences, and for me this bottom-up is very appealing. It means down to earth. It means not waiting till others tell us to do it, but do it yourself. Take the initiative. And we were very pleased that earlier this year we had our 30-year anniversary offered to us by the Royal Society in London. And you see here a picture of a group of presidents, successive presidents. And in the middle, we have our gold medalist, Robert Jan Smit, who is also participating in this meeting, who just had received the gold medal from us for his major contributions as architect of a lot of the landscape that we are benefiting from today. Also, when we talk about the scientific advice mechanism, I think it's important that we all realize that he has been one of the key architects of this mechanism. For us, as an Academia Europea, it's important to realize that today we have, can you see it, the slide? I think it has disappeared. Ah, it's back. Okay, that today we are a little bit bigger than this initial group. We are now with 3,500 members from all over Europe. We have foreign members in all fields of science, including social sciences and humanities. I can tell you that our members are extremely happy to be involved in this scientific advice mechanism. They are very motivated for that. And a big advantage of our setup is that we have people from all disciplines, because the topics that are put on our table and the topics that we put on the table are by their nature cross-cutting. They cannot be handled just by one class. They cannot be handled by just one specialism. It requires to bring people together from different backgrounds. This is also facilitated by the setup of our hubs, which are all over Europe. It started with our hub in Wrocław. Then subsequently we opened a regional knowledge hub in Barcelona, then one in Bergen, and more recently in Cardiff. Each of these hubs have a regional but also a thematic focus. And the coordination is in London at our headquarters in Senate House. What is important is to realize that for our academy, with its members from all over Europe, it's very important to be there also where they are. And what is also important to realize that these hubs have complementary portfolios. The hub in Cardiff, for example, is a very important one for life sciences, but it is also the hub that is the center of activity for our contribution to scientific policy advice. These are our priorities. And if you look at them, these priorities are not only in terms of fostering science, but also to serve as a voice for science. And again, we are very happy to be part of a larger family, together with our partners in crime in SAPIA, the Scientific Advice for Policy by European Academies. And I'm very happy also about the synergy that is developing between the different academic networks in Europe. In this context, we have organized last year a joint conference with ALEA, and of course for us it's very important to have a strong coordination between what's going on the national level and what's going on the European level. I'm also very happy with the synergy that is developing between Academia Europea and the European Research Council and COST, because we need this synergy. We need to widen European participation, for example, in the European Research Council. And the Vice President of the European Research Council is a member of our board. And we see joint information days organized by the European Research Council and COST to enhance the participation from the less research-intensive countries in European research funding schemes. And I was very pleased that a number of these meetings took place here in Estonia, right in this room. When we talk about COST, it's important to realize that COST is a very important networking tool in the European research area. COST is financing networks not only with participation from the EU member states, but also from the countries which belong to the Council of Europe and also countries that go even beyond that. Today, 45,000 researchers take part in the networks called Cost Actions. And I can tell you these are very dynamic networks with a major participation from young people. 45,000 people involved, most times on interdisciplinary topics. And that's exactly important for the scientific advice mechanism, because the questions that are put on our table from the Commission and from the group of chief scientific advisors are in many cases interdisciplinary in character. So this is a very important point, that the academies who form the consortium are inclusive. They do not limit their call for experts just to their members. They go beyond that. And that also applies to the Young Academy of Europe. At this moment, not yet member of the consortium, but we sincerely hope that they will join the consortium in the next phase of the SAPIA network. A few words about the synergy between cost and other instruments in the European research area. I already mentioned the high potential for synergy in SAPIA. There's also a very important role of cost as a pre-portal to other funding schemes, including the European Research Council, because it is brain circulation, mobility, building networks that is the key to success in the career of the scientist. And of course, what we try to do in our efforts for science evidence-based policy advice is to connect excellence in science to the very challenging questions which were already introduced by the President of the Parliament earlier today. We are very happy that we have already one of the previous presidents of the Young Academy, Nicole Grobert, as a member of the group of chief scientific advisors. And I'm also personally very happy that we have Janos here as a very prominent member of that group, and he will tell you more about the role of the group of chief scientific advisors later on in the program. Again, this Young Academy of Europe is bottom up. This is a group which started with a group of starting grantees of ESC that said Europe needs a pan-European Young Academy. Nobody told them. And again, it's a success story, and they're wide open for further growth. They need nominations. And they are very motivated to contribute to the scientific advice mechanism. A few words about SAPEA itself. Of course, it is a relatively young feature. It makes part of a larger ecosystem, the scientific advice mechanism. I already mentioned the group of chief scientific advisors, but there's also the SEM unit, headed by Johannes Klumpers, is doing an excellent job. And SAPEA is funded by a grant by the European Union. What is clearly evident from a picture that is now on the screen is I think the symmetrical happiness between the SAPEA consortium, represented by the presidents of the constituting academies, ALEA, ESAC, FEAM, Europaea and Akadeemia Europea, and the group of chief scientific advisors. And in the middle, you see Commissioner Moedas. So again, this is a very interesting construction with different roles for the different parties, but it works very, very well. And again, it gives a lot of rationale also to the academies, because it's also bringing the academies closer together. So it has really a lot of spin-off, so to say. When we talk about the mechanism, what of course is important, the connection with the outside world. And again, the connection to the Young Academy for us is very important, but also the connection through cost is also bringing in the private sector, the small and medium enterprises with their expertise, the large companies, all through a mechanism that brings together expertise at the highest level. When we talk about the products, This is one of the first products that came out, and this is a report on food from the oceans. And this is a report that was responding to a request from the Academy to give us, let's say, the latest news in terms of what are the prospects to use the oceans as a source for food, not only in terms of the hunting mode, but also in terms of the harvesting mode. In the working group that dealt with this topic, we had people from all backgrounds. We had people from the natural sciences, but also people from social sciences and humanities, because in the end of the day, it's also a matter of perception. And I think this is a very healthy thing, because we really have to go over the walls between these different disciplines. And this is really something that is speeding them up. Well, you see here a picture where you see in the middle, again, Commissioner Moedas, because this is handled by his portfolio, but the questions come from the Commission at large. So also there is the Commissioner for Fisheries and Food Supply, Commissioner Velas, who requested for this report. And there you see also members of the working group who were very proud to deliver this report. What is important is that, of course, this is progress. This is work in action. And our most recently adopted topic, making sense of science, is a very nice illustration of that. Because in a world where we have a lot of turbulence and where many people have questions about uncertainties in the science, it is very important that we have a concentrated effort in how can we do the best in terms of taking out of complex issues the essence. At the same time, also, we must be aware that we have to live with the intrinsic uncertainties. We should not hide them. It's very important that in this process we also come up with different options, because the academies advise. And they do this, again, together with the group of chief scientific advisors. And the two key people in this process, you see the pictures there, Pearl Dijkstra from the group of chief scientific advisors, and from our side, Ole Pedersen, who is vice president of Akadeemia Europea. So again, it is a group effort. The questions are simple, straightforward. How can we come to scientific policy advice in the best possible way, and how can we learn to live with the uncertainties and basically to give a fair picture about the advantages and disadvantages of certain scenarios, not only in terms of the policy, but also in terms of issues like legislation. And again, this is a challenge. This is a challenge and a responsibility. And in this context, this meeting today could not be at a better moment. We had lively discussions on this. We have a working group, which is chaired by Professor Ordwin Ren from Potsdam. Of course, it all starts with the search for experts. And again, we were very impressed by the overwhelmingly positive response from our members and also from members of our sister academies to serve, because this is community service. This is something that goes on top of the work that different people do in science and in innovation. And again, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. And I think that tells us something. That tells us that the community is ready to take this up. And it's very clear that the same is true for national academies, like the Estonian Academy, and I know that its president is making a major effort towards this goal. During our Jubilee in London at the Royal Society, we had a lively panel discussion. You see here Nico Grobert from the group of chief scientific advisors. You see Johannes Klumpers also there. You see Professor Ordwin Ren, the chair of this working group on making sense of science. So for us it is very important to communicate this to our members and also to have their feedback. And I can assure you this was a very lively panel. The working group is working on pretty tight constraints. Report should be there in a half a year from now. So it's really a tough job. But again, I can assure you that they're very motivated. And I can also assure you that the discussions that will take place here today and tomorrow will be also communicated to them. Also in terms of the joint interest for the topic making sense of science. And again, this is a joint effort of people from different backgrounds, natural sciences, social sciences, and humanities. And again, also with an active participation of the Young Academy of Europe. So I think that we are on the move. I think that we are basically doing things that the people had in mind when they established academies. And again, the momentum is there. And it's very clear that we need that momentum at this turbulent time. It's a challenge, but it's also a great opportunity. So thank you very much, Estonian Academy. A very happy birthday at this unique celebration. And it's a great pleasure to be with you here today.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation and the information about all these different advice mechanisms which are available in Europe. We have plenty of time for discussion. It's about 7 minutes we have left. Are there questions or comments?
7 minutes is a happy number.
You're right.
So,
especially for Chinese, right? Questions? I would like to start just containing the institution, this sign advice mechanism. You mentioned that the topics are set by yourself or by the Commission. But how free are this sign advice mechanism members to setting the topic really by themselves? Because sometimes you need money for that, and maybe if you take, let's say, 2 years or something like that, so it's a costly, let's say, process you have to start, right?
I think it's an important question, but it's not so difficult to answer it. The scientific advice mechanism has been set up in order to give the best possible science-based advice to the Commission. And of course, by the time this was set up, there were already a number of items on the radar of the Commission and on the radar of the group of chief scientific advisors. At the same time, and I think this is really vision of the Commission, there was space left for the academies to come up with topics themselves. The whole mechanism is funded by one grant. The grant does not make a difference between whether the topics come, let's say, in a bottom-up way, on the initiatives of the academies, or in a more top-down way on request of the Commission. What is very important is the timeline. And the timeline you just saw for the topic making sense of science is a typical timeline for most of the reports which are produced. That means not ultra short, because for very ultra short things, action has to be taken immediately, and there's simply no time in many cases to do a deep analysis. But at the same time, the questions are most times quite pressing in terms of an advice that comes in 2 years from now is simply too late. From our side, it's very important that we put today on the table things that we feel will be sooner or later on the plate of the Commission, or will be sooner or later topics that a group of chief scientific advisors might feel the need for a solid analysis. So this is an interaction. And in that sense, there is not so much difference between the bottom-up way and the top-down way. And of course, with the change in the Commission coming up, we expect that the number of issues that come from the Commission will not be as large as the number of issues that were put on our table from the Commission at the early stage. But again, there are plenty of issues that have to be addressed, and we are very grateful to the Commission for the setup in this ecosystem where we have a very capable SEM unit, a very inspiring group of chief scientific advisors, that we have that freedom. That's also important in terms of motivating our members to leave some space for bright ideas. And that's, after all, also the philosophy of an entirely different animal, the European Research Council, which is also based on trust that researchers, that they will come up with excellent ideas and that they know what they talk about. So in this context, I can assure you that we have here a happy mix between the two different approaches, and I trust that we will be able to move forward in this spirit.
More questions? Please go ahead.
I have one question about the other side of the coin. So, are you also dealing with the question how this side of politicians is receiving advice, processing advice? Because one side is you are providing advice, and the other side, how this advice is reaching to the audience. And why I'm asking, we have seen it in the case of Brexit and pre-Brexit and advice organizations which were asked to work, and basically they gave advice, but it was not even discussed sometimes even. So that is this type of question.
I think it's very important that we respect the democratic process. We have elected politicians. Our duty is to provide them with the best possible science, evidence-based advice. At the same time, of course, we have as academies also a task to communicating to the public. That goes hand in hand. That's a different part of our mission. And again, it's here where the Estonian Academy makes a major effort, and that's also, it's here where also the Young Academy of Europe makes a major effort, and something that we see also as very important for organizations like Akadeemia, Europea and COST. But the scientific advice mechanism clearly separates the role of advisor and those that take a decision. Our task is to give the input to decisions, but of course also other factors come in. But we will never sit on the seats of the Commission or, let's say, when we do it on a national level, on the seat of the elected politicians, because that's a different responsibility. But at least we should not be blamed for not feeding them with evidence, which they have to take into account. And whether they disregard it or not, of course, that's a different thing. But when we see how enthusiastically our reports have been received so far by the Commission, then I must say I feel a strong motivation to proceed further. And it's clearly based on mutual trust. And again, it's learning by doing. But I think this ecosystem that has been set up, in our view, with a vision where the Commission cares about what comes out of the science. And that's not in every country the same. In that sense, I think we are a little bit ahead of what is taking place in some countries on the other side of the Atlantic, to say it mildly. And I think in that context, it's also important that a lot of the questions are going beyond national borders. To me, again, as earth scientist, this is natural because geology does not stop at national borders. Environmental problems do not stop there. Energy issues do not stop there. So for me, this is a very natural development.
We are perfect in time now. Thank you very much again for your presentation and for the discussion.